who really killed Jon Arryn? Yes, I'm serious. But wasn't it Lysa Arryn, his wife? I mean, she said so. Well, yeah, presumably. The real question is, who put her up to it? Okay, sure, she said it was Littlefinger. She clearly believes it was Littlefinger. Littlefinger never admits to it. So Moonman, I know you're asking, how is it that she would believe it was Littlefinger if it wasn't? If there's something more here? Well, we might also ask, how did Littlefinger keep up this romance, adultery, and eventually murder plot inside the Red Keep and Robert's Court? How is it that he took the incredible risk of trusting the unstable and unreliable Lysa Arryn in a conspiracy to murder one of the most powerful people in the realm? It's nuts. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's really going on, I think, in Littlefinger's mind, what's really going on in Lysa's, and yes, who really killed Jon Arryn, as well as, other points to get into, like, for example, the implications of the Redditor G-Steph's research into the very late drafts of A Game of Thrones, which could suggest that Lysa being the killer was a very late addition. It could suggest that. G-Steph and others have suggested that it does. And quite a bit more, I think. But first, I'm Greg, aka Moonman, and this is Moon Messages, Episode 3. It's a podcast wherein I get to discuss all my other thoughts and theories on A Song of Ice and Fire that won't make it into my overproduced videos in my lifetime anyway. Evidence of this can be found in the fact that Part 3 of Stannis, That Peach, and the Battle of Wind, my over-elaborate series on basically a novel political analysis of the whole song from the ground up, has, at the time of this recording, still not been released. What can I say? I have some good editing days, and I have a lot more bad editing days. So I thought it would be nice to talk more Varys and Littlefinger. If you are listening on Patreon, thank you so much for your support of this vital work in song studies. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to see the parade of original house banners by my friend and collaborator Erin O, waving about as you listen. Some of those you will be seeing in there, you'll be seeing for the first time. If somehow you found this channel without having seen the main work I'm doing on YouTube, check out the link. What's Stannis really up to, etc. Okay then. Littlefinger's master plan. Kill Jon Arryn. Marry Lysa, take over in the Vale. And for some reason, Harrenhal as well. Now, the bigger strokes of Littlefinger's master plan, or such that it is, whatever it is actually going to be the subject of Part 4 of Stannis, That Peach, and the Battle of Wind. So we're going to sidestep most of that. But the murder of Jon Arryn doesn't necessarily intersect with that much at all, which is what I'm going to be discussing today, because Littlefinger was as surprised as you or I to hear Lysa say he was involved. That's what I'm going to try and convince you of today. We'll see. Of course, in talking about these more outlandish theories of mine, I hope if you listen to the whole thing, particularly if you go to Patreon, and really get the entire discussion, I hope and I know some people have started to become a little bit convinced at least. I hope, it's evident that I'm thinking about these things seriously. Of course, I'm also aware that, I'm trying to convince people with the main series of some pretty outlandish things that I've put a lot more time into thinking about. The purpose of this podcast is to do something a little more off the cuff, with a little less rigorous research, and of course, easier to produce. But of course, it's in the back of my mind is that I am, by putting out these more outlandish claims without backing it up as well, I'm sort of undermining my credibility with the main Battle of Wind theory. And so be it. That's the nature of whatever bizarre project I'm engaged in here. Because like I say, I'm going to try and convince you that Littlefinger was bowled over. as much as we were in the last Sansa chapter of The Storm of Swords. So to start, maybe it's important to like recognize and remember, though, even though I only read the books like at the end of 2022, I wish I'd gotten to this sooner. What if the author puts out the next book and I haven't finished getting all my theories online? What a tragedy that would be. Take your time, Mr. Martin. Take your time. Take another 3 or 4 years if necessary, please. It's important, we maybe recall that like until that moment at the end of A Storm of Swords, the third book, who killed Jon Arryn was like a still a real mystery, or something potentially that readers still thought the Lannisters did, that Cersei did, or and my impression, though, I mean, how would you even begin to do this kind of research? Is that there was speculation at times about like okay, the Lannisters, sure, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe that's misdirection. And the two most enigmatic and mysterious schemers, Littlefinger and Varys, I do think came up in conversation as possibly being involved. Storm of Swords comes around. There's a lot of revelations in that book. A lot of big twists and turns, and one of them is Lysa. Shortly before her death, Peter says, "There's no cause for all these tears." Of course, she's with Sansa on the edge of the moon door. "Tears, tears, tears," she sobbed hysterically. "No need for tears, but that's not what you said in King's Landing. You told me to put the tears in Jon's wine, and I did, for Robert and for us. And I wrote Caitlin and told her the Lannisters had killed my lord husband, just as you said. That was so clever. You were always clever. I told father that. I said, Peter's so clever. He'll rise high. He will. He's sweet and gentle, and I have his little baby in my belly." Was it clever? Was it clever to involve Lysa Arryn in this? What an insane risk. If you're thinking about Littlefinger as like a schemer and a mastermind, and I do think he has big plans, and I do think he's a real player of the Game of Thrones, and I do think he has enormous ambition, and of course is absolutely willing to murder people. I mean, that's not even a question, really. But the question is like, how does he take this risk? That's what, at least one of the things that started me wondering about this. Like what is the actual mechanics of this? Like, so they've been carrying on. She goes on to say, like, we waited for so long. What she's kind of imagining, you start to, like, obviously, okay, he's been conning her then. So what's the story here? He's been leading her along for some time and eventually starts working her up, promising like, okay, eventually we're going to be together. No, we're going to be together sometime. And then eventually he's like, well, the thing that's standing in our way is your husband. So, okay, I have a plan. We can be together. This will work. You just have to put this poison in his wine. And then he'll be gone, and we will eventually, my master plan will come to fruition. We will marry. And that's, that makes sense, some sense on its face, until you start to think about, like, how would that work? These are courtiers in a court. They live in a castle together. Are they having secret meetings together? So ignore the spider for now. Set that aside. The fact that you can't escape Varys and his little birds. Set that aside. Even just like being in like courtiers in this court, like what is going on? Are they meeting in secret? Like, is it just stolen whispers? Like, that's already seems a hard thing to keep up. Then you add to that, Jon Arryn knows Lysa was pregnant before they married. She says this, actually. She tells Sansa, "Father said I ought to thank the gods that so great a lord as Jon Arryn was willing to take me soiled, but I knew it was only for the swords." Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, it may also be because he was desperate for an heir, and it was important. It was actually a kind of a bonus that to find to know that she was like proved fertile in a way. But he knew. Um, which does he know it's Littlefinger? Well, I mean, if Hoster Tully didn't tell him, it wouldn't be hard to figure it out. He was kicked out of River Run around that time, and Lysa is responsible for his rise. It's Lysa like lobbying her husband on Littlefinger's behalf that gets him his various appointments, that ends him up in the place of power that he is in the Robert Court. So, like, how would it be hard to figure out? Littlefinger's got to be conscious of this, right? So, like, I would actually start from a point knowing nothing else but that history of imagining that Littlefinger would probably be steering as clear of Lysa Arryn as possible. He would probably be smart to never find himself in a room alone with her. Like he owes everything to Jon Arryn and Lysa, and like he can't really upset that, right? So like the even suggestion of impropriety, he's already, this is like a narrow edge he's walking, being lobbied for by the woman who loves you, whose husband is, as a result of this, showing you favor. Like that's a narrow edge to walk. And so I would imagine that he would be avoiding her as much as possible, certainly in private. He's not going to be stopping by, and not going to be like certainly seen like dipping in and whispering. Or that would be my natural assumption based on those facts. And that is actually very key, because I think that's exactly what was going on. And it makes sense and actually makes the whole plot possible, that he's basically avoiding Lysa Arryn all these years, except maybe little moments here and there, moments of inevitable interactions of state, in the court. Maybe they do out of propriety have him over for dinner once a year or something. I don't know. Maybe who knows? But that's that's like a baseline assumption. If that's all you knew about Littlefinger's backstory, the next piece, and if I contradicted myself earlier in this, again, the nature of this, I'm kind of doing this off the cuff. Littlefinger, and this is the next key piece, is that Littlefinger doesn't know that he and Lysa were ever intimate. Now, he does know, what he does know is that Lysa's always been in love with him. And that is reason enough when your benefactor, the hand of the king, is showing you favor and is raising you up and giving you these opportunities, and you know that his wife is in love with you and has been since childhood, and occasionally maybe even surreptitiously bats eyes at him or something. Maybe. I'll get to that. This would be reason enough to avoid her and keep everything above board and never be doing anything to be suspected. Because that's a key thing. He goes around telling everybody, rather boldly, that he was intimate with Caitlin at River Run, even being so repulsive as to brag about being her first in a typically Westerosi way. Of course, Lysa tells Sansa in this chapter at the end of A Storm of Swords that he was drunk. He said Kat's name, but it was always her. And so we get let in, and this is key. We're let in on this secret about the relationship between Littlefinger and Lysa that Littlefinger doesn't know. He is led in on a big revelation. Well, first we are, and we get to process that through. She tells Sansa that he said Kat's name, but it was really with her. He was drunk. Then she tells him the passage. Let's see here. She doesn't love you the way I have. I have always loved you. I've proved it, haven't I? Tears ran down her aunt's puffy red face. I gave you my maiden's gift. I would have given you a son too, but they murdered him with moon tea. And she gives the recipe for terminating a pregnancy. That's past and done, Lysa. Lord Hoster's dead, and his old maester as well. Littlefinger moved closer. This is a complete side note, but that, for reasons of what Kat says in another place, that's possibly Lewin, who has been killed by this point at Winterfell. That's an aside. Anyway, so Littlefinger is hearing this for the first time. I gave you my maiden's gift. We have been intimate in the past. And there's only one time when that could have been. Littlefinger's reaction isn't to go, what? Because Littlefinger, while he is a schemer and he is a kind of mastermind and a kind of embittered little twerp who, he's the roller backpack, bow tie kid who in our world, grows up to be like a young Republican or something. But, who's like, well, if I can't be the hero, I'll be the supervillain, he's hearing this for the first time and he doesn't freak out. He does the other thing that is key to Littlefinger's character. He masterfully improvises. He goes with the flow. He's a man of opportunity and improvisation. To jump aside for a moment, this is what he does when he picks up Sansa earlier in the same book after the death of Joffrey. He improvises that he intentionally killed Joffrey when he was really trying to kill Tyrion by pumping her for information, and goes with it. He goes with the flow. And we're going to get more into that later. So here he is hearing this back at the Eyrie at the end of A Storm of Swords. He's hearing this nugget for the first time. This thing he's been going around saying one thing, but he's hearing that now that what he should be able to put together, it was actually Lysa all along. And he doesn't react. He moves forward like he's always known this. And that in itself is interesting. So come later, he says, that's past and done, Lysa. Lord Hoster's dead and his old maester as well. Littlefinger moved closer. Have you been at the wine again? You ought not to talk so much. We don't want Elaine to know more than she should, do we? Or Marillion. So you can take this to mean that he's always known this, but I think it's more interesting that he's learning this for the first time, and that makes sense. He's been saying all this time this other thing. It's already bold enough that he's saying it, but if he's just lying, it's weird. I think this makes more sense. And it's interesting because I think it's about his reaction, that he's going with it. And he's saying this has never been said out loud. He's learning for this for the first time. Sansa doesn't know this. And so he's proceeding, and his mind is moving so fast. He's proceeding already to, okay, this is a secret I've kept and lied about previously. So now how would I react? Okay, well, Lysa, and clearly Lysa believes that this is real. So he's proceeding along those lines. He's a master improviser and liar. Cat never gave you anything. It was me who got you your first post, who made Jon bring you to court so we could be close to one another. You promised me you would never forget that. Nor have I. We're together, just as you always wanted, just as we always wanted. just let go of Sansa's hair. So he's talking her down. He's saying what he needs to say. We're learning that, like, again, this is where Littlefinger's power comes from. And then a few moments later, she says, that's not what, no need for tears, but that's not what you said in King's Landing. You told me to put the tears in Jon's wine, and I did, for Robert and for us. And I wrote Catelyn and I told her the Lannisters had killed my lord husband, just as you said. That was so clever. You were always so clever. I told father that. I said, Peter's so clever. He'll rise high. He will. He will. And Littlefinger responds, Lysa, Peter sighed. After the storms we've suffered, you should trust me better. I swear I shall never leave your side again for as long as we both shall live. So he's lying. He's already decided now, like, she needs to go. Because, and not hard to see why, she is now accusing him of conspiracy to murder Jon Arryn. That's really dangerous. And she's saying it out loud. And if he was involved in that conspiracy, makes perfect sense. But I think it's more interesting that we've been set up to understand that he is learning something new in this moment about his own life from Lysa, and then learning this other new thing again. And well, then, I come back to, okay, it's interesting that he doesn't know this about it having been Lysa all this time that he was intimate with. And he's learning this for the first time. But again, okay, why does she need to be gotten out of the way? Well, she's talking this very, very dangerous information, a murder plot, she's just saying it out loud. And you got to wonder, though, and so it makes sense. It's perfectly logical that he's like, well, okay, that's the end of this. Like, she's got to go. Just out of self-preservation. But where then is the self-preservation in him engaging in this plot in the first place? It's just too dangerous. She's just too unreliable a person. Now you can say, like, well, maybe she wasn't as, like, out of it and scattered before murdering her husband, and becoming really unstable in her fears and paranoia, alone at the Eyrie. Maybe she's also being affected by some weird telepathic forces that are keeping her up at night. There's all kinds of things that could explain that change that she would, but is it reasonable? Does it seem like we're to understand that she was actually like a stone cold operator before this? Is that what we're supposed to get from the story? I don't think so. And I cannot imagine that it makes sense, again, whether this is the author's intention or not. I can't imagine that it makes sense, really, that Littlefinger is meant to have said, yeah, okay, I'm going to involve Lysa Arryn in a long sort of surreptitious courtship and a plot to murder her husband. I'm going to use her. I want to get him out of the way, so I'm going to use maybe the least reliable character in the story. Add to that he knows very well, I mean, of course he does, that Varys is listening to everything, that Varys knows what goes on in the Red Keep. Now, you would, I think, be able to guess that if he's a real operator, he's a real player, like, he understands this. A lot of people do. But he even says it in A Storm of Swords to Sansa on the boat when they're leaving King's Landing. He says, when he reveals that, meet me in the Godswood was his notes, right? It had to be the Godswood. No other place in the Red Keep is safe from the eunuch's little birds, or little rats, as I call them. There are trees in the Godswood instead of walls, sky above instead of ceiling, roots and dirt and rock in place of floor. The rats have no place to scurry. Rats need to hide, lest men skewer them with swords. So he knows very well that the walls of the Red Keep are not safe from the eyes of the spider. Now, this leads you to the next thought, which is, okay, notes. How does he communicate? Dangerously, yes, with Sansa. First a note, and then meetings in the Godswood. So he risks a note once, and then meetings with Dantos in the Godswood to pass information where the little birds can't hide. So this tells us, okay, Littlefinger knows and casts more doubt on like how could he keep up like any kind of relationship of any kind with her, and why would he risk it? But at the same time, it introduces one possibility: notes, letters. Still dangerous, but he does risk it once. He's no longer residing in the Red Keep. At least I think that's the case. I'd have to look at that. But either way, it's an interesting tidbit. Letters. But the interesting thing about letters in which you maybe profess your love, ask for patience, letters in which you implore your secret lover never to interact with you in person for risk of rousing suspicions, letters in which you eventually entice your pen pal lover to murder her husband, can be written by anyone. And that is what we're going to talk about over on Patreon. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So I've raised the questions here, and I'm going to give you my answers in the second half, and we'll talk about all of that, as well as getting back to the murder of Joffrey and the nature of Littlefinger as a consummate improviser around that. I'm going to talk all about that, and also about G-Steph's research into the late drafts that perhaps call into question whether Lysa was always meant to be the killer, even in the published draft of Game of Thrones, or at least right up until just before publishing it. I have thoughts on that. So a lot more to come in the Patreon. There's links, and hopefully a lot more. Please consider, checking it out. These videos, they've all I've got going on right now. Like I've been laid off for the last 2 years, which is why I've taken the bold action of doing a Patreon and hustling you all for money. To the patrons who have signed up, I mean, I do really appreciate it. Like after most of the last 2 years not working, the like $177 I got from it last month was really like a significant thing. Also, if it grows, will help fund the real videos, which at least one of the reasons it's taken so long, or that it could have gone faster. This part 3 was if I was able to afford more original artwork than I was, and part 4, Littlefinger's part, really can't be produced without quite a bit more of that. Anyway, so join me over there, and we'll keep talking about this.